In terms of the Brexit process, we've seen a number of developments over the last few months. So, for example, since June, there's been an EU Council meeting. There was the Cabinet meeting at Chequers, and then the long-awaited release of the Brexit White Paper from the government. And the White Paper is perhaps the most important development on the UK side since the referendum, because what it's done is provided detail for the first time on the UK position as regards to the future relationship with the EU in terms of trade. It presents a vision which would see the UK retain many legal and economic ties with the EU, but whilst building the foundations for some autonomy on both trade and immigration. And for me, on the topic of goods and customs in particular, there is quite a lot to digest within the paper. And so for businesses that move goods cross-border, there is the opportunity to take this additional information and map it against risk assessments that have already been done and give you then the ability to road test how your organisation will be impacted if these proposals were to be implemented. The proposal is to establish what's called a free trade area for goods moving between the UK and the EU. And this would go some way to alleviating the concerns of business with complex supply chains. And in terms of goods that come from the rest of the world, the suggestion is for a facilitated customs arrangement. And this is where the UK would apply EU tariffs and policy for goods intended for the EU, but where the UK will be free to apply its own tariffs and policy for those goods intended for UK-only consumption. And such an arrangement will be the first of its kind and will require the use of some quite advanced technology. So for me, it would likely mean that it would need to be phased in beyond the end of the transition period. I think also would require businesses to implement a number of systems and process changes. The paper reiterates that free movement will come to an end, but it does recognise that businesses should have the ability to move their talented people. And this is crucial for all organisations that employ EU nationals. But the question here is what talented will mean in practice. Will it include both higher and lower skilled workers, both needed by many businesses in the UK? And over the last few months, we have seen the people implications of Brexit move up the agenda for business leaders. And that's both in terms of how the UK's new immigration requirements will impact labour mobility, but also how regulatory change may drive relocation decisions. We are expecting, though, more detail on the UK's future immigration policy in the autumn. But for me, there is still plenty that businesses can be doing in the meantime. So, for example, analysing current workforce models, communicating with staff on a regular basis, and also ensuring that systems and HR resources are in place to deal with the forthcoming changes. On services, the paper acknowledges that there will be a looser set of ties post-Brexit, and that passporting, that we hear about for financial services, will come to an end. But there is more detail needed here, particularly around the future legal and regulatory environment. And given the importance of services to the UK economy, it's really crucial that these discussions continue at pace in the months ahead. It's really important to remember that the UK position on the future relationship, outlined in the white paper that we've talked about, is only half the picture. And what we're really yet to see is the detailed EU reaction to the proposals. And given that this is just the start of the negotiations as to that future relationship, we would expect the final outcome to be somewhat different, with concessions needed really from both sides. What is much more pressing is agreement on the UK withdrawal. So for that, the target date is October, although there is already suggestion that this could slide to the end of the year. The main issue there, still to overcome, is the border in Ireland. The future customs arrangements are a vital component of the negotiations in this regard. So it's perhaps unsurprising to me that we have so far seen so much more detail as it relates to goods. The There are still a number of obstacles to overcome, and therefore we would suggest the possibility of a no-deal scenario is perhaps more likely than it was a few months ago. For example, we've recently carried out some polling of UK businesses, and that very much backed up this view. The EU reaction to the paper and the political environment in the UK will determine whether a deal can be done in time. So for now, more than ever, we're encouraging businesses to take a comprehensive approach to Brexit planning, and that's mapped against a scenario of most change. So now is the time to have real granularity to those risk assessments and the contingency planning activities that you're undertaking, and to ensure that your business is ready for the significant changes that could take place on 29th of March next year and the immediate aftermath of that. And given that both the UK and EU policymakers are ramping up their preparations for the no-deal scenario, it would be really prudent for businesses to do the same. So from our perspective, we tend to categorise the biggest issues for business into three broad areas: supply chain, people and technology. And the Brexit team that we have at Deloitte includes subject matter experts in each of these areas, and they draw upon the relevant expertise from Deloitte service line and industry groups as required. And our teams can support your business at every stage of the Brexit preparation process. So please do get in touch with us if you'd like to discuss this further.